What if every person who hurt you was not your enemy, but your reflection? What if the pain they caused was not a punishment, but a message from your own soul, asking to be heard? Carl Jung once said that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. Those words are both beautiful and terrifying because they reveal that our relationships are not random encounters, but mirrors of the deepest parts of who we are. Think about the people you've loved the most, and the ones who have hurt you the deepest. The irony is that they often live in the same person. You meet someone, and it feels magnetic, fated, almost spiritual. But as time passes, the same intensity that once felt divine starts to feel destructive. You find yourself repeating familiar pain, familiar arguments, familiar heartbreaks. It feels unfair, like you're trapped in an endless loop of disappointment. Yet from Jung's perspective, this loop is not a curse, it's communication. Your psyche is trying to show you something you haven't yet faced. Each person who enters your life holds up a mirror to a hidden corner of your soul, a place where light has not yet reached. Maybe you've always attracted people who make you feel unseen, or perhaps no matter how hard you love, you end up feeling abandoned. At first it seems like their fault, but if the pattern keeps repeating, Jung would ask, what inside you keeps calling this lesson back? Behind every toxic dynamic lies an unhealed story. Perhaps it began in childhood, when love was conditional or silence felt safer than truth. Those early experiences sink into the unconscious, shaping how you love, what you tolerate, and even what you mistake for intimacy. When you meet someone whose wounds complement your own, the attraction feels electric. But that electricity often comes from the spark between two unhealed souls trying to recognize themselves through each other. Jung called this process projection. It means that what you see in others, the beauty, the cruelty, the betrayal, is often a reflection of what you've disowned in yourself. We fall in love with our own light, mirrored in another, and we suffer from our own darkness reflected back. So before you label your past partners as villains, pause. Ask instead, what were they showing me about myself? Maybe the one who lied was showing you where you betray your own boundaries. Maybe the one who ignored you mirrored how often you ignore your own needs. To see the mirror is painful, but it's also the beginning of freedom. Because once you recognize that your relationships are not happening to you, but for you, every heartbreak becomes a doorway to self-awareness. And through that doorway, the shadow waits, the hidden side of you that every toxic love awakens. Deep inside you, there's a part that rarely speaks, but always acts. It's the side of you that hides behind smiles, the one that quietly collects every fear, resentment, and unmet need you've ever buried. Carl Jung called it the shadow. The shadow isn't evil. It's misunderstood. It holds the emotions you were taught not to feel, the truths you were too afraid to say, and the instincts you once needed to survive. Yet when these pieces remain hidden, they don't disappear. They simply find new ways to be seen. Often, that happens through your relationships. Toxic relationships are rarely about bad luck. They are psychic events, mirrors that awaken the shadow in both people. When someone makes you feel jealous, helpless, or desperate, it's not just about them. It's your unconscious trying to speak. The other person becomes a character in the inner drama you've avoided for years. Imagine, for example, someone who constantly feels abandoned. Every time a partner pulls away, panic floods their body. They might chase, plead, or cling, unaware that this intensity isn't about the present moment, but echoes from a forgotten childhood wound. The shadow remembers what the conscious mind wants to forget. Jung taught that the shadow will not rest until it's integrated. It keeps returning in different forms, through faces, situations, and heartbreaks, until you finally turn inward and ask, what is this trying to show me about me? Many people spend their lives running from the shadow. They move from one relationship to another, changing partners but repeating the same emotional script. The names change, but the story doesn't. Because what they're trying to escape is not the person, it's themselves. To face your shadow is an act of courage. It means sitting with discomfort instead of projecting it. It means admitting that the jealousy, anger, or control you blame others for may also live inside you. And yet this is not self-blame, it's self-liberation. Because when you see the monster clearly, it loses its power to hide in others. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." The same applies to love. You don't heal by finding a perfect partner. You heal by meeting your imperfect self with compassion. When you dare to see the shadow in your heart, relationships begin to change. You no longer need others to carry your pain for you. The people who once triggered you become your greatest teachers. And the parts of you you once feared start to whisper truth instead of chaos. This is the moment transformation begins, when you stop fighting your darkness and start listening to it. Because the shadow's real message is not destruction, it's integration. And integration is where the soul begins to remember its hidden purpose, a truth we'll explore next in the hidden contract of the soul. Some connections in life feel almost too perfect to be coincidences. You meet someone and there's an instant pull, as if your souls recognize each other from somewhere beyond time. Yet what begins as light can often end in pain. Why? Carl Jung believed that the psyche doesn't seek comfort, it seeks wholeness. And sometimes, wholeness requires meeting the very people who will awaken the wounds you've ignored. Every relationship, whether brief or lifelong, carries what can be called a hidden contract of the soul. This contract isn't written in words but in energy, an invisible agreement between two unconscious minds. I will help you face what you have refused to see. That's why we often attract the same kind of person again and again. It's not fate's cruelty. It's the psyche's persistence. The part of you that's still unhealed keeps calling in experiences that mirror your forgotten pain, hoping this time you'll awaken. Imagine someone who grew up feeling unseen. They meet partners who are emotionally distant, repeating the ache of invisibility. But beneath the suffering, something sacred is happening. The unconscious is saying, "This pain is your teacher. Stop looking outward for validation and learn to see yourself." The soul uses relationships as classrooms, and every heartbreak is a lesson disguised as chaos. Jung compared this process to alchemy. In ancient alchemy, base metals were transformed into gold through fire. In psychological alchemy, your pain is the fire, and your consciousness is the gold it forges. The other person is simply the flame that awakens transformation. But there's danger when we confuse the messenger with the message. Many people stay trapped in toxic cycles because they mistake emotional intensity for love. They cling to those who hurt them, believing that the chaos means connection. Yet true connection doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. To honor the hidden contract doesn't mean to stay in suffering. It means to understand it. Once you extract the lesson, the contract dissolves. You no longer need to relive the same story. It's like breaking a spiritual loop. The moment you learn, you are free. And perhaps the greatest act of love is recognizing when a relationship has served its purpose, not with bitterness, but with gratitude. You can whisper to their soul, "Thank you for being my mirror. I see now what I needed to see." In that moment, the unconscious transforms pain into wisdom, and the heart learns to love with awareness instead of attachment. Because once you understand the hidden contracts of your life, you no longer chase love, you become love. And that awareness leads to the next awakening, learning to break the spell of projection and finally seeing others for who they truly are, not who your wounds imagine them to be. There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the pattern becomes too clear to ignore. The faces change, the names change, but the emotional story stays the same. You find yourself saying, "Why does this always happen to me?" Unaware that this question is the key that begins to break the spell. Carl Jung warned that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That fate is often the web of projections we cast upon others, the invisible threads of expectation, fear, and desire woven from our own unhealed wounds. Projection is not just psychological, it's deeply human. We see in others the qualities we cannot yet face within ourselves. We fall in love with our light reflected in someone's eyes, and we suffer from our darkness mirrored in their behavior. In both cases, what we truly encounter is ourselves. Think of it like a movie screen. The people in your life are not the film. They're the surface where your inner story is being projected. When you're unaware of that, you keep trying to change the screen instead of changing the film. You criticize the partner, replace the friend, escape the environment. Yet the same movie keeps playing because it lives inside you. Breaking the spell begins with awareness. When you feel triggered, jealous, or rejected, pause. Instead of asking, "What did they do to me?" ask, "What did this awaken in me?" That single shift turns pain into insight. It's not easy. The ego resists. It prefers to blame than to introspect. But true power lies in responsibility, not control. To own your projection is to reclaim the energy you've scattered onto others. It's the first step in turning your unconscious patterns into conscious choices. In practical terms, this means cultivating inner observation. Write when you're angry. Sit with your jealousy. Let your discomfort speak instead of silencing it. You'll start to see that every emotion is a messenger from your inner world. As you do this, relationships transform. You no longer seek to fix people. You seek to understand yourself. You no longer chase validation. You generate it. And slowly, the same situations that once triggered chaos now evoke compassion, because you see the child behind your reactions, the old wound behind the need. This is what Jung called individuation, the sacred process of becoming whole. You stop dividing your soul between good and bad, victim and villain. You simply become aware. When projection fades, clarity appears. You see people not as saviors or threats, but as fellow travelers, each carrying their own shadows and mirrors. And from that place of awareness, a new kind of healing begins, not by rejecting the darkness, but by transforming it. That transformation is the alchemy of healing, the art of turning pain into consciousness and wounds into wisdom. Real healing rarely looks beautiful at first. It begins in chaos, when everything you thought you understood about love, about others, about yourself starts to fall apart. Yet beneath that collapse, something sacred is forming. Jung called this process alchemy, the transformation of the raw, painful material of the soul into the gold of awareness. In ancient alchemy, fire was essential. Without heat, nothing could change form. The same is true in your inner life. The emotional fire of heartbreak, rejection, and disappointment burns away illusion so that something real can emerge. The pain you resist becomes the doorway you need most. When you begin to heal, your first instinct might be to reject everything that hurt you. You'll want to erase the past, shut down your feelings, or harden your heart. But healing doesn't come from suppression. It comes from integration. To integrate is to hold your pain with compassion instead of judgment, to stop seeing your darkness as an enemy and start recognizing it as your teacher. Every emotion you once labeled bad, anger, jealousy, loneliness, carries wisdom. Anger protects your boundaries. Jealousy points to forgotten desires. Loneliness calls you back to your own presence. When you listen, you realize that none of these emotions were trying to destroy you. They were trying to bring you home. Healing, then, is not about becoming someone new. It's about remembering who you were before the world taught you to hide. Jung believed that within every person lives the potential for individuation, the journey toward becoming whole. And wholeness doesn't mean perfection. It means holding opposites. Your love and your fear, your strength and your vulnerability, your light and your shadow. Imagine the heart as an alchemist's vessel, a crucible where the raw elements of human experience are transformed. Pain enters as lead, heavy and cold, but when met with awareness and compassion, it begins to shimmer. The heat of honesty melts resistance. The gold of understanding appears. This is the quiet miracle of psychological alchemy. The same energy once spent on suffering becomes fuel for growth. The same heartbreak that shattered you becomes the foundation of empathy. The same loss that broke you open makes room for deeper love. You begin to see that healing isn't a destination, but a relationship with yourself. Every time you choose reflection over reaction, compassion over blame, you strengthen that relationship. Slowly, your inner world reorganizes itself around truth rather than trauma. And when that happens, something subtle but profound shifts. You stop searching for love to complete you. Instead, love flows from you, not as dependence but as presence. That is the gold hidden in the fire, That is the quiet brilliance born from everything you once feared to face. And when you finally step into that light, you discover a new way to love, conscious, free, and whole. That is where the journey leads next, loving consciously, living freely. When healing begins to settle into your bones, love no longer feels like a battlefield. It feels like a mirror that reflects peace instead of chaos. You stop seeking someone to fill your emptiness, and instead, you start meeting people from your fullness. That is what Jung meant when he spoke of individuation, the moment when love becomes a conscious choice rather than an unconscious craving. To love consciously is to see another person not as a savior, nor as an enemy, but as a fellow traveler on the same mysterious path of becoming whole. You don't need them to rescue you, nor do you carry the burden of rescuing them. You understand that the purpose of relationship is not to escape loneliness but to reveal truth. And sometimes that truth is joyful, other times it's humbling, but it's always sacred. In conscious love, boundaries are not walls, they are invitations. You learn that saying no can be an act of love, just as much as saying yes. You no longer confuse intensity with connection or silence with safety. You allow others to be who they are without trying to mold them into the image of your old pain. The spell of projection is gone. The mirror is clear. Freedom blooms quietly in that clarity. You begin to trust your solitude instead of fearing it. You realize that being alone and being lonely are not the same. One is absence, the other is presence. When you are at peace with yourself, love ceases to be a need. It becomes a gift. Carl Jung often described the meeting of two individuals as the meeting of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. This is the essence of conscious love: transformation without possession, intimacy without imprisonment. You will still feel fear sometimes, you will still face pain, but now you know where it comes from. You no longer drown in the unconscious tides of your past. You swim in awareness. You no longer chase what you lack. You cultivate what you are. And as your heart expands, compassion replaces resentment. You forgive not to forget, but to free your energy from old stories. You thank those who hurt you, not because they were right, but because their presence awakened the self that had been sleeping within you. That is the quiet revolution of Jungian love, to realize that every relationship, even the broken ones, was never about losing yourself, but about finding yourself through another's reflection. So you stand now, not as half of a whole, but as a whole ready to meet another whole. You love with awareness, you live with purpose, and at last you understand. The people who once broke you were never meant to destroy you. They were sacred messengers, guiding you home to yourself.